The morning breeze felt colder that day, or maybe it was just the way Amara clutched her notebooks to her chest, like a shield. Her worn sneakers clashed with crisp uniforms, Italian leather backpacks, and the platinum smiles of students stepping out of luxury cars. The polished sign of Hillridge Preparatory School reflected the sunlight like a promise, one never meant for her. Amara hadn't transferred by chance. The public school in her neighborhood had cut its music program, and her mother, a cafeteria worker at the university, had taken on 3 jobs to get her this scholarship. "You're going to shine, baby, no matter where." The hallways smelled like expensive perfume and silent competition. On her first day, no one said hello. They just looked her up and down like she'd gotten lost. The English teacher mispronounced her name, and in science class, a blonde boy whispered, "Think she even knows how to use a microscope?" But Amara had already learned how to be invisible. Life had taught her that being seen too much could cost too much. So she lowered her head, took a deep breath, and sat in the back row. The seat reserved for those who don't belong. She didn't know that same week she'd be called to the stage, handed a microphone, and just moments later, she would make everyone cry. On Tuesday morning, Amara turned the wrong corner and came face to face with a slightly open door. Piano notes floated through the air like perfume. It was the music class. She hesitated. The smell of polished mahogany and the glow of brass instruments lining the walls were intimidating, the kind of place made for those who were born knowing how to perform. Still, she pushed the door open. The music stopped immediately. The teacher, an elegant woman with a tight bun and white blazer, turned with a rehearsed smile. "You must be Amara," she corrected gently. The teacher didn't apologize. She just motioned to the back of the room, to the bench without a backrest, far from the instruments. Nobody looked at her directly. But the whispers and muffled giggles said enough. In the center, a boy was dramatically playing something complex on the piano. He finished and was met with applause. The teacher praised him and suggested he perform at the school's annual talent festival. Then she asked, "Anyone else want to sing or play something today?" Silence. For a moment, time stood still. Amara looked at the piano. Her fingers tingled, but she didn't move. "Very well," the teacher said, not even glancing at her. "Let's continue with music theory." The moment passed, like so many others in her life, offered to the air, but never to her. She opened her notebook and pretended to write, but something inside her twisted, like a note trapped in her throat. She had promised her mother she'd sing if she had the chance, but this didn't feel like a place for voices like hers. On Friday, the entire school was summoned to the auditorium. It was the first open rehearsal for the Hillridge Talent Festival, a polished event where rich kids strutted their curated hobbies for applause. Amara sat alone, way in the back. On stage, students took turns, singing, dancing, reciting, a parade of confidence and entitlement. That's when he appeared, Tyler Green. Captain of the fencing team, son of a diplomat, the kind of boy who walked like the floor owed him something. He spotted Amara. "Hey, new girl," he said loudly, grinning. "You even know how to sing." Some laughed. Others pretended not to hear. Amara froze. Her cheeks burned. The comment echoed across the room, loud enough to sting. It wasn't an invitation, it was a setup. "Come on, just for fun," Tyler added with a smirk. "Let's see what you've got." The music teacher, seated up front, gave a stiff smile. "It's a great idea, Amara. Show us you're integrating." All eyes turned to her. There was no way out. Refuse, and she'd be called a coward. Accept and fail, and she'd be a meme by the end of the day. In the far corner of the room, a woman with braided hair and a staff badge watched silently. She didn't say a word, but her eyes, calm, steady, locked onto Amara's, and in that quiet look, Amara found something ancient. Courage. She stood up. Walking up to that stage felt longer than any walk Amara had ever taken. Each step creaked like the whole room was waiting for her to slip. She kept her eyes on the floor, not out of shame, but to avoid the stairs. Those stairs that stripped away worth before she even opened her mouth. Tyler had already taken a seat in the front row, arms crossed, smug, like a hunter who'd laid a trap and now waited to enjoy the collapse. "Mic's on!" he shouted. "Don't want to miss a single squeak." Laughter, whispers. The teacher didn't stop him. She only gestured for Amara to begin. Just for fun. But they all knew it wasn't an invitation, it was a trap. The phrase "just for fun" dripped with something darker. It meant, "We expect nothing from you, and we'll laugh if anything comes out." It was offering her a stage with no support, a chance with no grace, an audience with no empathy. Amara took a deep breath. She had no music track, no warm-up, not even a song picked out, but she had something more powerful, a memory. Her mother washing dishes as Nina Simone played in the background. Her grandmother braiding her hair while humming gospel under her breath. Her grandfather, before he passed, telling her, "You carry our music in your blood, even when you don't sing." She looked at the mic, closed her eyes, and did the one thing they didn't expect. She began. For a few seconds, Amara stood still, eyes closed, microphone in hand. The silence around her was heavy, not reverent, but expectant. The kind of silence that hoped for a shaky voice, a missed note, the kind of silence that feeds on failure. She froze. Someone whispered, "Called it." Another chuckled. Her throat tightened. Her hands were cold. She still didn't know what to sing. Then a quiet presence stepped closer to the edge of the curtain. The substitute support teacher, the woman with the long braids, stood just out of view. She wasn't part of the regular staff. But in that moment, she was the only adult in that building who didn't want Amara to fail. Softly she whispered, "Sing for you, not for them." That was it. A simple sentence, calm, quiet, but full of something no elite classroom had ever taught: truth. Amara opened her eyes. The crowd was still watching. Nothing outside had changed, but something inside had. She gripped the microphone and began. The Hillridge Auditorium was completely silent, but it wasn't the kind of silence that welcomes beauty. It was a silence loaded with expectation, a room hungry to humiliate. Amara looked at the microphone like it was a mirror, and in that mirror she didn't see a girl. She saw a story, the crowded bus rides, the smell of laundry hung overnight, her mother's tired smile after triple shifts, her grandmother sewing a hand-me-down dress, whispering, "Even when you got no voice, you still got a song." She knew what they wanted. They wanted a joke, a clip, a stumble they could post with sarcastic captions, and she almost gave it to them. Almost. But instead of fear, something else came through. The first note, soft, controlled, sharp as a blade. And suddenly the silence wasn't judgmental anymore. It was stunned. Laughter died. Eyes widened. Even Tyler's crossed arms slowly fell to his lap. She had barely begun singing, but already they weren't ready. Amara's voice filled the room like the auditorium had been waiting for it all along. She didn't scream. She didn't show off. She didn't try to impress. She just existed inside the music, and that was enough to silence everything else. The song she chose, or perhaps the one that chose her, was an old spiritual. "Sometimes I feel like a motherless child." The pianist stopped playing. His fingers trembled. Time seemed to stretch. A staff member looked up from her clipboard. The janitor paused in the hallway. Even the music teacher, who had barely remembered her name days earlier, held onto the edge of her seat. Amara wasn't just singing. She was unlocking something ancient, and everyone felt it, even if they didn't understand it. Eyes across the room began to water. At first, just a shimmer, Then lips began to tremble, hands covered mouths. Tyler, who had thrown her on stage to fail, now sat frozen, confronted by the brilliance he tried to bury. She was still mid-song, but the damage was done. By the second verse, there was no doubt. No one in that room would ever forget this moment. Not the students who never noticed her, not the teachers who dismissed her, and especially not Tyler, who now stared at the floor, his jaw slack. Amara sang with her eyes closed, as if every note came from a place only she could reach. But somehow, they all recognized. One of the popular girls in the front row cupped her mouth to muffle a sob. The principal, known for being cold and exacting, blinked rapidly. This wasn't just a performance, it was a mirror. And in that mirror, every person saw something ugly. Their assumptions, their mockery, their silence, shattered, and all by a girl they hadn't even bothered to greet a week earlier. When the final note rang out, there were no claps, there was only stillness, a sacred kind of quiet. When something too real has happened, then slowly, applause, rising, with tears, with bowed heads, with shame and admiration blended. At Hillridge, status didn't matter anymore, power had changed hands, and it was now in the voice of the girl they tried to break. Just for fun. While the students applauded and wiped tears, one person remained calm, not because she was unimpressed, but because she had expected this. The substitute support teacher, the woman with braids who had whispered strength into Amara, watched with a quiet smile. She didn't join the clapping, she just nodded, as if confirming a truth she had known long before the others. Later, as the auditorium emptied, she approached Amara. "You ever performed before?" Amara shook her head. "Only in my church. And at home." The woman smiled. "That wasn't just performance, child. That was testimony." She handed Amara a card. "Saturday, Community Arts Center. We got something you might want to be part of." Amara blinked. "But why me?" The woman leaned closer. "Vudai, because your voice isn't just for singing. It's for reminding folks who they are and who they've forgotten." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Amara with a single thought echoing louder than any applause. What if this was just the beginning? By Monday morning, Amara was no longer invisible. In the hallways of Hillridge, whispers had turned to stares, but not the mocking kind. This time, they were filled with something else, uncertainty and respect. Students who had never looked her way now mumbled hello. Some offered smiles too wide, too rehearsed. Others just stared, unsure how to approach the girl who had just cracked their perfect world wide open. Tyler didn't speak to her, but his eyes found her from across the lunchroom. And this time, they didn't mock, they wondered. The music teacher left a note on Amara's desk. "Consider performing at the spring showcase. Your voice deserves to be heard." But Amara wasn't chasing stages anymore, because something deeper had shifted, not just around her, but inside her. That afternoon, as she packed up her bag, a younger girl tapped her shoulder. She looked nervous, 12, maybe 13, hair in tight curls, oversized hoodie, eyes that didn't hold contact for long. "You don't know me," she said quietly, "but I saw you sing." Amara nodded gently. "I was supposed to perform too," the girl continued, "but I didn't. I got scared. Thought they'd laugh." She paused. "But when you sang, I don't know, it was like someone lit a fire in me, like it's okay to be loud, to be different, to be me." Amara smiled. "It is." The girl handed her a folded paper, a handwritten poem, and on the bottom it said, "For Amara, who sang like we mattered." Amara never asked to go viral, but someone had recorded her performance, uploaded it, and overnight it spread, not because it was polished, but because it was true. Her voice reached classrooms, living rooms, even church pews across the country. Messages poured in, people who looked like her and people who didn't, saying the same thing. I cried. I saw myself in you. Thank you for reminding me I still have a voice. Hillridge tried to make it part of their diversity success story. They even asked Amara to speak at a donor luncheon. She declined, because she knew this wasn't about them. This wasn't a feel-good moment to be packaged and sold. This was revolution, soft and quiet, wrapped in a melody they never saw coming. One evening, as Amara sat on her bed, scrolling through the messages, she paused on a video, her singing overlaid with comments in 10 different languages. She smiled, then cried. Her mum peeked in from the hallway, exhausted from another shift. "You okay, baby?" Amara wiped her face. "They're listening, Mama." Her mum sat beside her, wrapped her arms around her. "Of course they are. You were born to be heard." But neither of them mentioned the truth that sat silently between them. Her grandmother, the woman who had taught Amara her first song, had passed away just months earlier. She never got to hear this performance, but somehow, Amara knew she was there, in every note, every tear, every trembling breath. Because some voices don't die, they echo. A week later, the school organized a cultural appreciation assembly. It was their awkward attempt to respond to what had happened, to turn her moment into a statement. Speeches were read, PowerPoints shown. The music teacher praised hidden talents among the student body. Tyler was on stage too. He said something about recognizing each other's gifts, but Amara didn't clap, because she knew it wasn't an apology to her. It was an apology to their own guilt, their own shame for what they had almost destroyed, simply because it hadn't come wrapped in wealth, whiteness, or confidence. She didn't need their applause now. She had something stronger, clarity. Months passed. The video had gone viral, but what mattered most happened off camera. Amara and her mother started a community program in the basement of a local church. They called it Echo, a simple room, donated instruments, a place where kids who felt invisible could learn to be loud on their own terms. One day, a reporter asked Amara, "What does it feel like to be famous now?" She smiled. "Fame is when the world listens, but freedom is when you finally listen to yourself." On the wall of that tiny room, a handwritten sign read, "Your voice doesn't need permission." And every day that room echoed with off-key notes, nervous lyrics, shaky rhythms, and full hearts. She never returned to Hillridge, but in that basement, she became someone far more powerful than a student. She became the voice that taught others. It's not about being chosen, it's about choosing to be heard.